The unexpected gift from Barron Trump leaves a barista in tears as it changes her life. The ancient espresso machine at the Grounded Bean sputtered and hissed like a tired dragon, spewing steam into the frosty December air as Mackenzie Mac Nightingale tried for the third time to coax it back to life. The 24-year-old barista's hands trembled slightly, not from the cold seeping through the cafe's poorly insulated walls, but from the weight of the eviction notice stuffed into her coat pocket. 36 hours remained before she and her younger sister would lose their apartment, and the temperamental espresso machine seemed determined to ensure she wouldn't make enough tips today to change that fate. The cafe door chimed, letting in a blast of Vermont winter air and an impossibly tall young man bundled in a charcoal peacoat. Mac barely glanced up, focused on the machine's pressure gauge, until she heard a familiar voice murmuring nearby, "Did you see who just walked in?" The whispers began, as they always did when Barron Trump appeared anywhere in Burlington, though he seemed to be doing his best to blend into the background of the small coffee shop despite his 6'7" frame. Mac had seen him before, usually early mornings when the cafe was quiet. He would sit in the corner with architectural drawings spread across the table, drinking plain black coffee and sketching buildings that looked like they belonged in science fiction movies. He never mentioned his name or his family, tipped well, and treated her with a kind of careful courtesy that suggested he knew what it was like to be judged by strangers. Today, however, was different. The espresso machine chose that moment to emit a sound like a dying whale, followed by an ominous click and complete silence. Mac's heart sank as she realized the ancient equipment had finally given up the ghost. Her manager, Mr. Rossi, was in Florida for the holidays, and the repair service wouldn't be open until after New Year's. Without espresso drinks, their busiest holiday week would be a disaster. "No, no, no," she whispered, fighting back tears as she opened the machine's side panel. The smell of burnt rubber confirmed her worst fears. Behind her, she could hear customers beginning to leave, the bell chiming with each lost sale. Her sister Penny's insulin prescription needed to be refilled next week, and their landlord had made it clear that no more extensions would be granted. "Excuse me," a quiet voice said above her. Mac looked up to find Barron Trump standing at the counter, his blue eyes showing concern. "I couldn't help but notice you're having trouble with the machine. I actually learned a bit about these models while working on a sustainable coffee shop design project. Would you mind if I took a look?" Mac hesitated, years of hardship having taught her to be wary of offered help. But something in his expression, an earnestness that seemed at odds with his famous surname, made her nod. "I don't think it can get any more broken," she said, attempting humor despite her situation. For the next 45 minutes, Barron worked on the machine while Mac handled drip coffee orders. He had removed his expensive coat, rolled up his sleeves, and was thoroughly engaged in what appeared to be a complex repair. His hands, she noticed, were those of someone who actually worked with tools, not what she would have expected from the son of a billionaire. "The heating element's shot," he finally announced, "but I bypassed it using the secondary system. It's not a permanent fix, but it should work until you can get it properly repaired." He demonstrated the temporary solution, showing her which switches to toggle and how to monitor the pressure. The machine hummed to life, steam rising properly for the first time in weeks. Mac blinked rapidly, trying to maintain her professional composure. "Thank you," she managed. "You have no idea what this means." She trailed off as her voice threatened to crack. Barron seemed to sense her distress, ordering a complicated holiday drink that required all her concentration to prepare. As she worked, she overheard him on the phone, speaking quietly but intensely about small business equipment grants and local coffee shop preservation initiatives. When she handed him his drink, he passed her a business card. "My friend runs a foundation supporting local businesses," he said. "They have an emergency grant program for essential equipment repairs. The deadline for applications is tomorrow night." He paused, then added with careful neutrality, "They also have a partnership with Burlington Housing Solutions for small business employees facing housing instability." Mac stared at the card, her vision blurring. Somehow, without her saying a word, he had seen through her careful facade to the desperation beneath. The card trembled in her hand as she thought of Penny, who had given up her own college dreams to work part-time while finishing high school, trying to help them stay afloat after their parents' accident 2 years ago. The grant application sat open on Mac's laptop at 2 a.m., the cursor blinking accusingly on the screen. She was sitting on their apartment's threadbare couch, surrounded by coffee-stained notebooks containing 2 years' worth of business ideas. Penny slept in their shared bedroom, her insulin kit carefully organized for the next day. The teenager had been handling her diabetes management with a maturity that sometimes broke Mac's heart. "Tell us about your vision for your business's future," the application prompted. Mac's fingers hovered over the keyboard as she remembered the sketches she'd been doodling during slow shifts, designs for a community-focused cafe that would offer barista training programs for at-risk youth. Dreams she'd tucked away as survival took precedence. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Don't forget to attach the equipment assessment forms. B double quote." She hadn't given him her number, but somehow he'd found a way to check in. Attached was a detailed report on the espresso machine's condition, complete with professional diagrams and repair estimates. The thoroughness of it made her pause. This wasn't just casual help. He'd put real time into this. The next morning, the Grounded Bean was unusually busy. A local food blogger had somehow heard about their artisanal pressure brewing technique. Mac had to suppress a laugh at the fancy description of their jury-rigged espresso machine. But the real surprise came when Professor Adelaide Blackwood from Burlington City College's Business Development Center walked in. "I hear you're applying for the Vermont Small Business Sustainability Grant," the professor said, ordering a cappuccino. "Interesting timing. I just received a rather compelling presentation about the potential social impact of community-based coffee shops in residential areas." Her pointed look suggested this wasn't a coincidence. Over the next hour, between serving customers, Mac found herself in an impromptu business consultation. Professor Blackwood asked questions that forced Mac to articulate ideas she'd barely admitted to herself. By lunch, her grant application had evolved from a desperate plea for equipment money into a comprehensive proposal for transforming the Grounded Bean into a community training center. Barron appeared just before closing, accompanied by a serious-looking woman introduced as Maria Suarez from Burlington Housing Solutions. While they talked, he quietly began helping with cleanup, demonstrating a surprising proficiency with the mop. "Your sister's medical situation qualifies you for the Emergency Housing Stability Program," Maria explained, spreading documents across a clean table. "And there's a 2-bedroom unit available in a new development." She paused, glancing at Barron, who was very intently focusing on cleaning the coffee grinder. "It's one of our sustainable housing projects," he said quietly. "I may have done some of the initial designs during my internship." The pieces clicked into place. The science fiction buildings he'd been sketching weren't fantasies. They were real projects, aimed at helping people like her. Mac felt a sudden need to sit down. That evening, after Penny came home from her shift at the pharmacy, they sat together reviewing their options. The housing application was straightforward, the grant proposal nearly complete, but something still nagged at Mac. "I need to know," she said the next morning when Barron came in for his usual coffee. "Why go to all this trouble? You barely know me." He was quiet for a moment, focusing on the architectural renders on his tablet. "When I was 14, he finally said, "I spent a lot of time trying to be invisible in coffee shops. There was this barista in D.C. who noticed I always came in alone, usually after difficult days. She started teaching me about coffee machines, letting me help with small repairs. Never asked my name, never made me feel like anything other than a kid who needed a safe space." He looked up. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses have the biggest impact. The grant committee met 2 days later. Mac's presentation included not just equipment needs, but a comprehensive plan for youth barista training programs, partnerships with local schools, and community events. Professor Blackwood's endorsement carried significant weight, but it was the social impact projection that sealed the deal. The evening of the committee meeting, the Grounded Bean stayed open late for a community celebration. Penny was behind the counter, proudly demonstrating her newly learned latte art skills to Professor Blackwood. Maria Suarez chatted with other small business owners about expanding the housing program. And in the corner, Barron sat with his architectural drawings. But this time they were spread out for everyone to see. Designs for converting the cafe's unused second floor into a training center. Mac found him adding details to the community space layout. "You know," she said, setting down 2 cups of coffee, We're going to need someone to teach basic equipment maintenance in the training program. He looked up, a rare full smile crossing his face. I might know someone who's qualified, he replied, as long as you don't mind having a Trump on staff. Well, she grinned, it might help balance out having a Nightingale running things. Mom always said our name sounded too fancy for our bank account. The local paper ran a small story about the grant and the new program. Nobody mentioned Barron's involvement, per his request. But 6 months later, when the Grounded Bean Training Center opened its doors, the first class of students included kids from all walks of life, each wearing an apron embroidered with a small nightingale carrying a coffee bean. The old espresso machine was retired to a place of honor in the center's entrance hall, a plaque beneath it reading, "Sometimes broken things just need someone to believe they're worth fixing."